So we moved to the demo after the slide presentation. And in the slide presentation, what we really want to establish is that the notion of a project is central to managing and delegating access, because we don't want the security team to be the bottleneck. We need to delegate as much autonomy to the project teams as possible, but we also don't want to give them carte blanche. And so, in order to do that, we need to basically create a project sandbox, and that's what new project onboarding is all about. What this really does is create a base policy in Conjure, but also establishes the project record in the access request system. Because if the project doesn't exist there, you can't make requests against it. So all requests are attached or associated with a project, and that way they're scoped to that project. So this idea of project is very central, and you can roughly think of a project as an aggregation. You see it in Azure with a resource group. Related things are grouped together. You see it in CyberArk with the safe. Related accounts are grouped together. So a project is a way of grouping related assets. In this case, access requests, application identities, and then the permission grants for those application identities. So all that to say is the first step is to create a project. So I'm going to just call this project 1, admin name. So what it will do, it will check to see if that project exists or not. If it does exist, then it's going to say that project already exists. You don't onboard it again. And you can see that the admin name also has to exist. Now I'm going to put, and it will check for a CyberArk user. So one of the notions, and again, a lot of this stuff is being sort of felt out in terms of best practice. What are the conventions? What would we prescribe as a good configuration and setup for this? But one of the ideas is that the project admin is a core paths user, it has some level of access to the safes for the project. So we want to associate safes with the project, and therefore we need to know who is the project admin that has an identity in the core paths environment. And so there are other users I have in here, but I don't think I can actually name them. I'm not sure exactly. Oh yeah, took that. So devadmin1 is another user that I created for this purpose of simply giving a name that is known in the core paths environment. The building code, this is just something that I've heard customers talk about, that for chargeback and things like that, projects have some representation in their billing systems so that they can attach costs to it. And so again, this is just falling into a kind of a real world or mirroring real world experience. So when we save that, it creates the project record, tells us it did that, and so now we've got our project onboarded. And then when you click OK, that exits. So you have to start that up again if you wanted to onboard another project. But for the demo purposes, that's done. We can move on, and I realize you don't have to bring up the scroll menu over here. You can just click on these UIs here, and that'll bring up your other desktops. So project is onboarded. Now I'm in the developer role. I'm a developer. I'm doing my work. I've created an identity, and what I want to do is I want to create a new terminal here. So what I want to do is create an identity here, and the way I can do that is simply just editing new id.yaml conjure policy. Say bang policy ID is project 1, the name of my project. The body is just going to be a host with a name, project my ID. So this is simply, so all the identities are going to be under the base policy for the project. There is a policy in place. Let's see. Let's go look over here at our policies. So there should be a policy in here, admin 11 We look in our policies, and we should see a project one base policy. And we can see that the owner of that is the dev admin one user. So this is basically creating that association that the project admin is the owner of the project base policy. And typically this policy or these IDs would be submitted and applied as the project admin. Now for our purposes, I haven't set it up to that level of detail. I'm going to apply this as the admin user, which means that I can go ahead and load this policy here. This is not something that you typically demo to the customer. You would show them the policy and say, okay, here's where this identity came from. This was loaded by the project admin, who is the owner of the base policy, who can make changes to the base policy. The rank and file developer does not have the ability to do this, nor do we want them to be required to know how to do that. The developer should focus on writing code. So what we're doing here actually should probably be done as the project admin and the project admin does. But in any case, we want to just create this identity for the demo purposes. So we're going to cat that, pipe it to sudo docker exec interactive is very important there. We're piping this to the conjure CLI, and we'll say conjure policy load at root this policy. Now I could apply this to the base policy, and that might actually be more effective, as I could create the identity and just apply it to the base policy and load at project one. But you get the picture. This is what actually we're trying to insulate users from having to know how to do. So when we apply this part one, then come on, okay, so now we've got our identity. We don't need the API key, so we can just exit out of this if we want. And so now we've got an identity that we can request access for. So we see project one here, my ID. It doesn't, it's just a standalone identity. Has no access. So that's where the developer comes in and says, hey, I've got my identity. Now I need access. So I'm going to say, I'm going to submit an access request. Project one. Safe name. The safe I want access to is pet clinic dev. And this would be whatever safe you've got in your environment, obviously. Requester is me. That can be any value you want. This will actually check to see if the project exists, and if the so if I say foo here, there's no project called foo. So this will do some error checking and make sure that there's an existing project to make this request against, that there's existing safe that make this request against. There's no existing safe called foo. So a little bit of guardrails around your demo here. Requester can be anything. There's no checking on that. This is basically saying I am the developer requesting this. The environment now, in this model, some of the messages in the presentation, for low risk environments, you may auto approve an access request. You may deem that a development request is low risk and therefore auto approved. And so that's what the demo models here. If you click dev, this request will be auto approved and immediately provisioned. If you click test or prod, then it will go into the queue, and the security admin has to approve it and has to trigger provisioning for that to be fulfilled. So for this, since we're requesting a dev access, we're going to say dev here, and we name our identity, which is my ID. So again, the model is existing identity, requesting access to an existing safe that it doesn't currently have. So submitting this will go ahead and approve that, auto approve it, provision it. And so now we're looking at our identity here. If we refresh our view, we see that it's now inheriting from the Pet Clinic Dev consumers group that the synchronizer creates. So now my identity has access to the secrets in that Pet Clinic Dev safe. So we see here the address, the database, the password, the username for that MySQL database that's in there. So now my identity basically has access to that database. If we look in our access request environment, refresh this, we see that was provisioned. We see the identity, the project, the identity, the safe was granted, the time it was submitted. We've got these enumerated here. And we have the option of revoking that now, because if you hit escape, that'll come out. This button, I'm actually not sure how you, oh, whoops. So I accidentally revoked the access. That's probably a UI bug that needs fixing. If we go back to our user desktop, then we'll see that now that access has been revoked. So if we go back to the developer, we can go back here, then we should see that there's no longer any access to any secrets. And so that's something to be aware of. So let's create another access request. So if you go in, this is how you bring this back up. You just cd into v3 UI. That's the second submit access request, is the second UI. So bring this up here. I'm going to re-request that access. Project 1, safe name, pet clinic dev, requester is me. Now, just for grins, since we're here, we'll submit this to test and say my ID here. And I don't think I test to see if the identity actually exists. So I think we might actually create that. It's been a while since I wrote this. Actually, just try this and say foo and do that. And so we've submitted an access request for an identity. And so if we go over to our environment here now, we see that that's gone, because we requested that for the test environment, it's gone into the queue and it has to be approved. So if we approve that, we could reject that. But if we go ahead and approve it, then it moves to the provisioning queue. And if we provision that, then we could, then we'll see that's granted access. Now if we go back to our developer view, here, let's see, I think maybe this does create, yeah, it does create identities. I'd forgotten I do that. So now we see that project foo, so this identity, I stand corrected. You don't need to create that identity. This will create the identity for you, and then grant it access. So that's me getting re-familiar with my demo here. But now we've got an identity that we've created that has access to the safe that the developer can go off and use. The point is this appropriate? So we've done this, and we've approved this. But this is where the auditor could step in and say, okay, we're looking at this now. This is a low-risk environment. It's a development environment. That's all well and good. Well, what if the developer requested access to a production environment, and that didn't get, and that got approved? So if the developer comes in and says, I need access to production environment, we're going to say, Project 1, pet clinic prod. There's no safe there. Okay, so let's say pet clinic. I know there's a pet clinic test. So let's say pet clinic test, requesters, J Hunt. We're going to say that's a test environment. We're going to do that for that newly created identity foo. Submit that, goes into the queue, and let's say that, just for grins, the security admin approves it and provisions it. And now let's say that the auditor comes in and says, look, you've got a development project that has access to dev and test environments. Is that appropriate? This is a read-only environment. This is just going to show that this identity has access to this database as this user. The real intent of this is to start foreshadowing or give us a catalyst for talking about governance, because now we're looking at not only can we provision and revoke access in a timely and efficient manner in order to speak to the DevOps workflow concerns that developers and project teams have. That's the secrets management story. But now we're elevating this. We're saying that basically self-service is the on-ramp to governance, because the automation and the audit trail that is required in order to do self-service effectively gives you the tools that you need to start doing governance for application identities. And that's what this is here. And the real intent is that this could be fed to an actual IGA solution. We don't want to require customers to invent that or to do that here. This user in this database has certain entitlements. And by extension, then this identity, this application, has those entitlements in that database. So there's several levels of indirection that we need to model and provide to a governance platform in order to say, this identity now has these entitlements in this database. Is this appropriate? And that whole appropriateness access review, this is really standing in for something like SailPoint. The front ends, these other front ends, are really standing in for solutions like ServiceNow, where you're submitting requests, you're reviewing workflows or requests and their progress through a workflow. But this view here is really something that a governance platform, this is the kind of information that the governance platform needs in order to provide that higher level view into what has access to what, and then make qualitative decisions around that, if it's appropriate or not. If it's not appropriate, then they could say, well, this is inappropriate. This is a development development application that has access to a test user. You need to revoke that. And then that would go back to the security team and say, okay, well, look, this is inappropriate. We need to revoke that. And we take that away, and now that developer no longer has access to that secret. As we saw before, inadvertently we removed that access. But if we look at the foo identity now, it now only has access to the dev environment. So again, the whole point of this demo is to do two things. One is to show customers and prospective customers the art of the possible, that this is something that we have built for customers before. We're using this demo as a way of showing things to think about, your workflows, what can be auto-approved, what goes into deciding if something can be auto-approved. But it also gives us that springboard into talking about identity governance, which Cloud Entitlements Manager does, and which our identity messaging is really going to start moving toward, and it needs to include the application identities as part of that conversation. So happy demoing.